Hey, welcome to Free Thinking Theology Thursdays at 3. That's 3 o'clock p.m. Central Time, if you're wondering. And I'm so glad to have you guys here. But I'm really sad because my co-host, Josh Klein, who normally leads this whole conversation, is gone today. He's at a theology conference in Chicago right now. So today, it's going to be me leading the conversation. But I'm excited to let you know that I'll be having a conversation with a new employee, I guess, at Free Thinking Ministries, a good friend of mine, and I'm really excited to introduce Thomas Mahler to you guys. How are you doing today, Thomas?
Doing good. Glad to be here for my, introduction to the Free Thinking Ministry show.
Yeah, and to the people out in YouTube world, they finally get to meet you. We've talked a little bit about you in the past, but now people finally get to see your face, and today they're going to get to learn a little bit more about you and why we invited you to be a part of this organization and this ministry. But before we get into that, I just got to say that when Josh is here, we always, we spend a little bit of time, reasoning together by applying logic and sound theology to all aspects of life. And that often gets us into cultural and political issues. And I'm just going to tell you guys, those of you that are watching, we will get back into that heavily, I think, next week. I'm sure we will. Man, I just can't help myself. I got to just talk about it a little bit because there's so much going on right now. Let's just quickly talk about a couple things before we get into you, Thomas. And let's talk about Gaza. What do you think of Donald Trump's statement the other night? I think a couple nights ago now. He said that the United States of America is basically going to own the Gaza Strip in Israel. What do you think about that?
Well, overall, I got to say, just with this past month in general, I love the winning that we've been getting with Trump in office.
Yes, amen to that. It's been fun.
It's been a nice change of pace.
Mm-hmm.
And with Gaza, it's definitely different. It's an interesting plan. I mean, what he said so far, obviously we don't know everything yet. He hasn't given out all the details yet of what they want to do, but tentatively, I'm for it. Just because it's different than anything else that's been tried in the Gaza area for the past 80 years.
Right. No, you're exactly right. I'm on the same page with you. And I think Josh will come back and he might have a different take, guessing just based on a couple of comments that he and I have made on Facebook. So it'd be good to hear his take. But, earlier, I'll show you my phone here. I shared this on Facebook earlier, and it's from Not the Bee, and it says me who voted for all of it, and then below leftists when Trump does a new thing. So there you go. And I put that on Facebook. Timothy Fox, our good friend, he says, "Bro, this meme is literally you." But one of the comments on it was my friend Jordan got on, and he said, "I doubt you voted for his plan or for his Gaza take." Let me start over. He says, "I doubt you voted for his Gaza takeover plan. That being said, I'm taking it just as a possible option he's putting up for thought. I think that it has no chance for either occurring or working, but I don't mind the outside the box thinking though." And I responded and I said, "I definitely did not see that coming, but given the utter and horrifying failures of the past 80 years and a recognition that a two-state solution will not work, I like Trump's idea. It might be the best of bad options, with all options being bad, which includes doing nothing. But in this scenario, thus in this scenario, choosing the best of a bad lot is the rational choice." And yeah, again, like you said, for 80 years, nothing has worked. We've listened to all the experts and nothing has worked. Arguably, you can say it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And so every attempt has failed. Every attempt at a two-state solution has failed miserably. And I think now we're left with, okay, there might not be a good choice, but is there a best of bad options? And I think maybe, just maybe, Trump's proposal might be the best of bad options. And with anybody that I've heard disagreeing with it so far, when you ask them, or if they are asked, well, what do you propose? They've got nothing, absolutely nothing. So I'm like, okay, well, if you're just going to complain about everything and you don't have a better solution, then go think about it for a while and don't talk to us until you have at least an idea to propose. At least Donald Trump is thinking outside of the box. I like it. I don't think we even need to send troops there to do that. It's already done that and basically, not quite finished yet, but basically secured the area. And that is their job. Let them continue to do that. I've been in Israel. They basically do that at the temple, right? That Israel is overall in charge, but they allow Muslims to do this on the rooftop, right? So it's like, okay, we've got this, but hey, we'll let you have your security under our umbrella of security. I think the Israeli boots on the ground is all we need. I don't think we need to send American troops there if we were going to do that. But, at the end of the day, Barack Obama famously told Americans that elections have consequences. And he's right. The Palestinians elected Hamas, and the majority of Palestinians today still support Hamas. Hamas is the epitome of satanic evil. I'd like to say at least the Nazis knew what they were doing needed to be covered up. They seemed to be ashamed of what they were doing with the whole Holocaust thing. Well, Hamas parades it. They take videos of it and put it on YouTube, and they're proud of it. They're killing Israeli children, raping the moms, and then calling home saying, "Hey, mom and dad, guess what I just did?" I mean, they're proud of it. It is evil. It's satanic evil. And so really, as far as I'm concerned, I think the best thing, I mean, people say, well, what about the good people in Palestine? Okay. Who are they? Number one, how are you going to figure out who's good and who's evil? I think the best thing would be there's nothing left there right now. It's been completely obliterated. I heard earlier, there's hardly any structure that would pass a safety exam in the United States. So everything, even the buildings that haven't been toppled, still need to be torn down because they're not safe anymore. I just think the best thing to do is just to completely level it and build from scratch. Nobody can live there right now anyway. So get the people who are still there to safety, and we can figure out who the bad people are then too, but it can't be there. It's got to be somewhere else. So anyway, I'm looking forward to talking about this more with Josh next week. I don't want to spend too much time on this with you. You weren't planning on talking about this, but I just wanted to say a couple. I'm intrigued about how Trump and his team thinks outside of the box. And do I think it's a perfect plan? No, but there's not a better plan.
And
go ahead.
I think we at least have to hear him out. He hasn't given the full details yet. We at least have to be willing to hear out what the plan is going to be.
Yeah, as Ben Shapiro said yesterday, let the man cook, right? You look at
let him cook.
Everything he's done, especially as far as international things go, everything Trump has touched has turned to gold, right? We had peace in the Middle East during Trump 1.0, and that was in spite of the fact that all of the so-called experts were telling him, no, it's not going to work. Your plan is horrible. You're just you don't know what you're talking about, Trump. Well, then Trump does it and it works. So you got to get out of his way. Let the man cook. He just got started. And one more thing. I want to say that, even though I don't think that we need to bring troops into this, I am not an isolationist. I've made it clear as an American nationalist I say that because I'm a Christian, I'm an American nationalist, and I've defined what that means. And I note that America's theological and philosophical foundations make it clear that every human is created in the image and likeness of God. That's why, or I should say that it's our foundations are clear that we all have human rights granted to us by our Creator. And then I would say then the reason why is because we are created in the image and likeness of the Creator of the universe. And even in that same document, it talks about our Creator, that the Creator gives us these rights, these objective and unalienable human rights. Now, as J.D. Vance has explained to us, he knows he is a good theologian, by the way, and a good philosopher. He has explained that there is an order, right? We have to love all people, but that doesn't mean that there is not an order of prioritization of who each of us looks after first. So, for example, I am called by God to protect my wife first and foremost, my family, right? I should put my wife, or if I had to choose between looking out for two women, your wife or my wife, I am obligated to put my wife first. You are obligated to put your wife first. Does that mean you don't love my wife as a sister in Christ? Of course not. Or even as a fellow human? Of course not. But you know, for the same reason that I'm not obligated to try to put your kids through college, right? And you're not obligated to pay for my son if he wanted to go to school. So, you know, we need to look after our own families, then our immediate neighbors, then our neighborhood, then, you know, and I think there is a flow, and we can back this up scripturally. Maybe we'll do that next week. That doesn't mean that we do not love others. Now, I say it's a both and. If I'm in a position where I have to either protect my wife or somebody else's wife, I'm going to protect my wife first. She's my priority. Now, but that doesn't mean that if I'm in a position to protect my wife and your wife, I'll do both. I ought to if I can. Now, since we recognize that all people are created in the image and likeness of God and that they have rights given to them by our Creator, if we're in a position to help others in other nations, then I think we ought to. I think that's the Christian thing to do. But in order to do that, we have to have our priorities and our morality correct. And I think, as I've described before, even though we're not saying that Donald Trump is the epitome of personal morality, his policies seem to be in line with the law of Christ. So I probably said too much about that. Is there anything else you'd want to add to that before we move on?
No, I mean, I think your analogy is spot on. Michael Knowles from the Daily Wire gave another great analogy, similar of just, you know, if you saw a kid drown in a pool, not your kid, just some stranger kid,
Yeah.
people would look down on you if you let him drown, if you
Right.
didn't jump in and save him. But if
At
you
least if
saw
you
that
didn't try.
kid,
Yeah.
but if you saw that kid and your kid both drowning, and
Mhm.
you don't save your kid, people are gonna
Oh,
look at you weird.
yeah. Right. Well, and they ought to, because
Yeah, and
your priorities are wrong, are messed up. Hey, Josh just popped in from Chicago. He says, "Hey guys, just popping on to say hello. Can't stick around as I'm at the conference, but wanted to say hi." Well, hi, Josh. We miss you, and looking forward to your thoughts on these matters when you get back next week, and can't wait to hear about this conference next week as well. So take some good notes and get back to us. All right.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
let's talk about you. I want our viewers to get to know you a little bit. They're going to be seeing much more of you. You'll be a regular guest here, not every week, but on occasion you'll drop by and have conversations with us. But people can count on you to at least. I think your goal right now is to produce at least 2 blogs a month on the Free Thinking
Yeah.
Ministries website, right?
Yeah, I'd like to at least bi-weekly if I can.
Yeah.
Get an article out there. Recently, I've just been posting. Pretty much, I cut up a school paper. It's on Paul's Theology of Suffering, and I've done posted 2 articles about that. I have a 3rd one coming out probably next week on that.
Okay, well, we're gonna get to that and what you're doing in school right now. But let's back up. How did the two of us even meet?
Well, it's a confusing way to say, but it's a loose family connection.
It is a loose family connection.
My wife's grandparents. You're cousins with my mother. You're cousins with the cousins of my mother-in-law.
Right. Okay. Let's say that again. I'm cousins with the cousins of your mother-in-law.
Yes.
So through marriage, several marriages.
Yes.
we're loosely related.
Yes.
We can't really say we're family, but we share family that shares family or something like that. Yeah.
Close enough.
Yeah, and yeah, I used to joke around. Okay, so so your wife's grandparents, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And I used to joke around that their kids, who were cousins of my cousins, I used to say they were my cousins-in-law when I was little. So I mean, we'd often all go to the cousins that we shared, and we'd all, we grew up together, and we played Star Wars together, G.I. Joe, or whatever it was, and had a lot of fun. But yeah, so we're loosely related, and I believe Luann, who I would call my relative-in-law, I think she reached out to me and said, "Hey, you got to meet this young man, Thomas. Loves theology and apologetics. Thinks he wants to go into that field. What's he got to do?" So she introduced us. Take us. What happened next?
Well, yeah. So she had mentioned that she knew you and told me a bit about you. Then, I think she reached out to you and she gave me your phone number, and I eventually texted you, and we met up when you're doing security one night.
For those that don't know, I did security for a church. Have a passion in my heart for protection. Everybody knows that, and I like to protect the kids. So there you go.
But yeah, so we got together, and I kind of told you that I was getting interested in doing ministry, and I was getting into theology, and just you would give me a couple different options of what possible routes could look like, and then from there, we just kind of started meeting regularly.
Yeah. I don't think we dreamed about how things might go. And when I first met you, I was like, well, I doubt this will go anywhere, but hey, it seems to be like a cool kid. All right. At that time, when we first met, you were a student at the University of Nebraska here in Kearney.
Well, I was a former student at that time.
Oh, you had just, okay. I thought you were. Oh, that's right.
From, I think it was the fall of 2020 till December of 2021, I was a student at UNK. And then after feeling called by the Holy Spirit and wanting to provide for my family, I dropped out to work full time because my son was born in January 2022. And it was in that period of being a dropout that I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do that we got connected.
That's right. Thanks for refreshing my memory there. Okay, but let's do rewind and talk about your time at the University of Nebraska here in Kearney. You were an astrophysics student, and I think one of the top of your class, right? I mean, you were doing some pretty cool things, studying black holes, and tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I was an astrophysics major at UNK, and pretty quickly was kind of taken under the wing of one of the professors there, Dr. Barrier. Would highly recommend to anyone who goes to Kearney to get to know him. And so it was then, after a semester or so of getting to know him, I was told him I was interested in doing research and being a research student for him. And the first summer, he got me into a research program where I got to spend the summer studying black holes and I guess essentially, well, I don't know if I should go into all the details of.
Well, I mean, maybe in a future episode we need to have you on just to talk about black holes and all the research you did. I mean, we had breakfast together this morning at the local, one of my favorite local breakfast places in town called Good Evans. But you and I met together for breakfast, and you blew my mind because we started talking about black holes. And I always thought that there was some kind of a hole that, I remember watching this movie. I told you about it. It was came out like in the late 70s or early 80s. I remember being a little kid, and the movie's called The Black Hole. And somehow I remember, it's kind of a wannabe Star Wars thing, with, sci-fi fantasy and, robots, whatever. But I remember they went into the black hole, and I was so scared of black holes. I always thought a black hole was going to get me. I really thought that when I grew up, I was probably going to have to spend a lot of time trying to avoid black holes. I don't know, just something I was really scared of. But talking to you this morning, the way you described a black hole to me, I was like, wait a second. Are you telling me that a black hole is basically like a donut hole? Which, if you buy donut holes, they're actual spheres, right? They're not actual holes, but they're spheres. And you're like, yeah. All right, just really quickly, explain that to the audience. A black hole isn't a hole, it's a sphere? I don't get it.
Well, yeah, a black hole it's despite the poor name, it's a 3D object. It's a sphere, essentially, just with kind of like how the Earth is a sphere, and there's gravity at the center of the Earth that draws us into the Earth. So the black hole is just this point of space that's a three-dimensional object, so it had to be a sphere at the, and so it's a sphere that draws in everything towards it, and then essentially, in basic terms, crushes everything down really small.
Wow. Okay. Well, you just blew my mind this morning over breakfast, and we will definitely get more into the astrophysics and the science and, kind of everything that started this journey for you. Really, it was science that started this journey. You did that for 3 semesters, dropped out for a while to provide for your family. Once you started, you had a kid, and I think that was the responsible, rational thing, moral thing to do at that point. I believe your professor was really sad when you had to drop out. But then we met and we started discussing apologetics. I remember talking to you about the Kalam cosmological argument, the fine-tuning argument, even the argument from mathematics for God's existence. Because you're as a physics nerd, you're good at math. So we're talking about all that kind of stuff, and it really seemed like science provided a bridge to theology for you. So many, in popular culture, people like to tell us that science and theology are at odds, but it seemed to provide a bridge from science to theology.
Yeah.
Am I getting that right?
Yeah. Well, it was an interesting time because when studying the physics and doing some of this research and seeing just how wide and ginormous the universe is, it's amazing. I was already a Christian, but it's just gave me a much better appreciation of God and His creation. Yeah. And actually, it kind of stimulated a desire in me to want to know God deeper and to study His Word more. Because there's just so much order. It's just how, you can do the fine-tuning argument, and just it's amazing, all the different constants and everything that has to be right for life to exist, for the universe to be as it is. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah. Well, even this morning over breakfast, you made a comment about how even the black holes serve a purpose for life in this part of the universe to exist. You don't have to get into that right now, but just how there's reason for everything within the universe. That seems to be reason for us to exist right now. Mind-blowing. But we'll talk about that stuff more in the future. But yeah, as a science-minded thinker, somebody in the field, a student majoring in astrophysics and cosmology, you saw then this bridge to theology that science was pointing to God.
Mm-hmm.
And that made a nice transition then for you to, when you started going to school again, not to start up with astrophysics, but to start up in theology.
Yeah.
At the same institution where I'm a professor at Trinity College of the Bible and Theological Seminary. Tell us about your time there.
Well, and this is with Trinity. It was actually really interesting. One of the biggest jumps for me to connecting science and faith more was the first class I took, and just it was essentially it was a contemporary theology. It went over like 20 different theological topics, just kind of an overview. And it's funny because while I was studying astrophysics at UNK, I was a young Earth creationist, which doesn't seem to make a lot of sense.
Right.
It was like just believe the Earth was 8,000 years old or whatever, and believe there's literal 7 days. But then it was that first theology class. They talked about creation and some of the different viewpoints, and my mind was blown. I was like, oh wow, there's some like legitimate arguments for old Earth creationism.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was actually theology that has now, I'm an old Earth creationist, essentially. Not that I get too intense in that fight right now, but
right. You're like, hey, we're all creationists.
Yeah.
We don't need to argue about the timeline or how time has passed here. If we all agree that in the beginning, God said, let there be, boom. But yeah, that's interesting because I'm the same way. I was a young Earth creationist for years. The first sermon I ever gave at the church where I was pastoring was about the need to teach young Earth creationism. And I'm so thankful that was before YouTube and before videos. I think there's audio of it somewhere. I hope it's never unearthed. But that was the first sermon I gave there. And it was really based on the teachings of Ken Ham. But like you, it was the study of theology, study of scripture even, that changed my mind, and really the study of hermeneutics, where and I have a article on my website about the different dominoes that fell one after another that moved me from being a hardcore young Earth creationist who was willing to fight and die on that issue, to now being somebody who thinks God probably created billions of years ago, and it actually doesn't make a difference, or it does. I mean, it doesn't make a difference to our theology, so anyway, I think it's amazing that you were an astrophysics student for 3 semesters, and then as a young Earth creationist, and then you became an old Earth creationist at Trinity College of the Bible and Theological Seminary. So I think Braxton Hunter and Jonathan Pritchett will get a kick out of hearing that.
Well, it was it was Braxton, Dr. Hunter, and Dr. Pritchett that actually taught the class.
Oh, really? Well,
it's Dr. Hunter who led the way for that.
Yeah. And again, I think I would speak for both of them. My position is the church doesn't need to divide over that issue. In fact, we shouldn't. We need to all realize that we're all creationists. We're all Christians. We all we all believe that the Bible is the inspired and inerrant word of God. It's just that we believe the hermeneutics. We have disagreements on hermeneutics, on how should this passage be correctly interpreted. And so that's where the disagreement is. And so I don't think that's one that needs to be a deal breaker for how we, if we should fellowship with one another or not. So, okay. So you went to Trinity, to major in theology. I think you went through that program faster than any student that I've ever been aware of. I mean, you flew through that program at record speed, light speed, since you're a physicist, and with straight A's. You just blew everybody's minds. I mean, how long did it take you to get through it?
It took me a little less than 2 years to get through.
I knew it was less than 2. Yeah, amazing. And straight A's though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Now here's the thing. At Trinity, one of the knocks that I hear against Trinity sometimes, like, well, it's not accredited. Now there are schools that accept Trinity's accreditation and credit hours. And we have deals with several schools. Now, however, one school that I don't think we have an official agreement with, Houston Christian University, which I think is just one of the best schools out there right now. They took you applied there, and they took you rather quickly, and now you've been at Houston Christian. Is this your first semester?
Second semester.
You're on second semester now. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So tell us about your major, your focus of study, and what's going on there.
Yeah. So I'm getting a Master's of Arts in Theological Studies at Houston Christian, and like Tim said, they surprisingly they took the credits. I wasn't sure because they said they typically don't, but they look at a case by case basis.
Yeah.
I gave like the syllabi of several classes, and
the syllabuses.
They did it. Yeah, syllabuses. Yeah. And they didn't seem to have any problem with it, and so which was great. And yeah, I started this last October because they do like 2 terms in a semester for their online students, and so it's a Master of Arts in Theological Studies, and I guess we kind of mentioned some of my articles. Funnily enough, a lot of the topic of my focus has been on the theology of suffering.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about that. But before we get into that, you think you're going to stop as soon as you get done with HCU, as soon as you graduate? Are you done, or you have further aspirations of even more education?
No, the hope is to go on to a PhD. I'll graduate hopefully, as long as things go according to plan, by the end of 2026 at Houston Christian, and then hopefully move on to get my PhD somewhere else. So,
wow. Yeah, where are you going to go?
I'm not sure. I'm going to apply to pretty much everywhere. I figured, I technically qualify for meet the requirements for Oxford. So I thought, why not?
Why? Yeah, you better at least apply. You do not have because you do not ask. So make sure. Yeah.
I mean, it's like a 15% acceptance rate, but it's like I figured, hey, 15% is better than nothing.
So you're telling me there's a chance. That's what Jim Carrey would say. Well, really cool. Well, man, it's 2025 right now, beginning of 2025. You think you're going to be done at HCU at the end of 26? Is that what you said?
Yeah, end of 26.
Wow. So you're flying through that too. Now, and people need to know you're also, you've been working full time.
Yeah.
And now you're working for Free Thinking Ministries too. You're working 2 days a week for Free Thinking Ministries. And the rest of the time you're painting. Right? So and you do fantastic work, by the way. Thomas came over to my house, painted my basement. Fantastic work. What's that like? You're raising a family. You've got tell us about your family really quick.
Oh yeah, so
it's a growing family.
Yeah. I have I got married in 2020 to my wonderful wife Karis, and we were 19 at the time, so we were very young. And then 2022 our first kid was born, Sullivan. He's my son. He's just turned 3. And then we have a daughter, Callie, who's about a year and a half. And then our third child's due at the end of March. So
you're not wasting any time, man. So
no, we're trying to bring back the U.S. Birth rate. We're trying to bring it back up. So
that's right. Well, somebody's got to do that. Thank you for your service. That's how to say. You've got this family. You were working full time, painting. That was while you were going to Trinity. You were still working full time as a painter, and you were even working full time as you started going to Houston Christian.
Yep.
But then we're like, you know what? Let's get you on board here. And you've been raising funds, and you've raised enough to now that you can work and do ministry and research and writing 2 days a week, and you're painting 3 days a week. And the more that you raise financially, the more time you'll leave from your painting job to the to devote to the Free Thinking Ministries. So for those watching, if God's blessed you in such a way that you have funds to support people in ministry, I'd encourage you to reach out to us and support Thomas, because we were talking earlier, if somebody is working at 1 day a week making widgets, and they can make 10 widgets in that 1 day, and they're working 1 day a week, then they're going to make 10 widgets a week. If that same person can work 5 days a week, he's going to make 50 widgets a week. So for us, if we're reaching the lost, if we're writing papers or books that are going to hit many people, we can do so much work so much quicker when we focus on this full time. Thomas would love to do this and to do ministry full time. So if you've been blessed financially and want to share your blessings with others, I want to highly encourage you to pray about supporting Thomas as he raises funds to work for Free Thinking Ministries full time. So I did that work for you, Thomas, so you don't have
to. I'll give a pre-thank you to everyone who does.
Yeah, even those who are praying about it. All right, so let's talk about what you're going to do here at Free Thinking Ministries. You already talked about how you're going to write blogs. The goal is at least 2 a month. But tell us, what else are you excited about? What else are you working on right now?
Well, so briefly, I'm also learning Greek right now and trying to learn Greek and Hebrew, which is very difficult.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So that's one small project I'm doing. Not that I'll be a master, but hopefully I'll get proficient.
Yep.
But the big project is the book that Tim and I are writing, currently titled Active Christianity.
Surprise! I don't know if we've made that public yet, but yeah, Thomas and I we're working on a book. Actually, got a lot of it done at this point. Tell us a little bit about Active Christianity.
Yeah, so pretty much our purpose is we want the book to be an encouragement for the church and also a guide for believers of all walks of life, of all experience. You don't have to, this isn't meant for academics or theology nerds. This is meant for your everyday Christian who, they can't spend hours upon hours studying theology. And it's a guide to help them know how to actively pursue Christ in their daily lives, to help fight that passivity that we're often lulled into, especially with the pushback from the culture. And so it's an encouragement to some and a kick in the butt for others.
I love it.
And so, it'll be a short book. I think we're shooting for like 150 to 200 pages because we want it readable, just accessible for everyone.
But we do have at least 2 books in mind. So, right. So what the first one is Active Christianity, and the second one we don't have an official name for, but it's about how to go on mission, right?
Yeah, because this first book is so focused on your personal daily walk that we felt that it was also necessary to have a book about pursuing the mission as well, and actually being a part of the mission of making disciples of every nation. This
first one is about really preparing yourself. You go through this book, it's like going through boot camp, right? And all your training. If you can get through this first book, you are going to be prepared then to go on mission. So it's first about getting prepared to go on mission, becoming the kind of Christ follower that can go on mission, and sneak behind enemy lines, that kind of, and then, right. And so once you're prepared, then which is the most important thing, then the second book that we haven't started writing yet, but we've got ideas about, will be, okay, now how do you go on this mission? What's the mission look like? And so, what's cool about this for me is, I spend a lot of time in writing academic papers, Currently got 2 academic books in process right now, using a lot of language that nobody knows. This the language of philosophers and systematic analytic theologians. We have our own language, but Thomas, as we've been working on this, I kind of take this language for granted sometimes, and you're like, hey, you can't use that word, Tim. People don't know it. Let's use this word instead. So you've actually been kind of an interpreter.
Yeah.
Now, and you're an academic too. I mean, your IQ is probably far surpasses mine. But you're an astrophysics guy, right? But you have a knack for speaking to the average everyday churchgoer, to the person who in the church, like who you said, who doesn't do theology full time, or they're not getting paid to study theology, but they still understand that they need to take their theology seriously. Well, I think this book that we're working on is going to help do that. It still has these academic ideas in mind, but I think what we're doing as we work through this book together is bringing that down and speaking about these things in everyday language that everybody already speaks. And so it's understandable, and they're not going to have to read this book with a dictionary next to them where they're looking up every other word trying to figure out what we mean. And so, just working with you, you've done a great job doing that. And I think people from, the layman in the church pew to academics will enjoy it. But definitely our target audience is not the academic.
Yeah, because especially a big part of this is about the practical steps that people can take. Oh, thanks, Josh.
What, Josh? I just found this out. We've got super chats now, so that's awesome. Hey, Josh just figured that out in Chicago. So now Josh also said this. Tim didn't offer to write a book with me when we first started. So favoritism. Well, it's because he's kind of like family, Josh. I mean,
yeah, it is nepotism, basically.
Oh man. Sorry, Josh. Josh, I do want to write a book with you soon. So let's get that done. Josh is about to start his PhD work, and just talking to him, seeing what he's going to work on, really excited about it. Does have to do with Molinism, but I'm sure we will collaborate on many things. But let's get you your PhD first. And while we're at it, the provisionist perspective. I'm looking forward to our conversation tomorrow as well, bright and early for me, but can't wait. So see you then. All right. Well, we were talking about the audience for the book, Active Christianity. Stay tuned for that. We are hoping to have this book done this year. I've got another. I'm also working on Mere Molinism, the second edition. That's going to be done this year. Man, that thing is coming along, and really excited. I just worked on an updated chapter today, so really excited about that. But let's get back to you. You've been focused on the website, freethinkingministries.com, on a topic that is just so fun to talk about. I mean, you love to talk about suffering. I mean, it seems to me it's like all of these different articles you're putting out are about different people who've suffered. Now, I talk about suffering quite a bit in my work, but my work has been talking about why a perfect God who's perfect in power, love, and knowledge would allow all this pain, evil, and suffering. And I think we've got good answers to that. And I think it really, really good answers to that. But I like to answer the why. You spend your time saying, hey, let's look at how all these different people suffered. Mm-hmm. Who are some of the people that you focused on as you've watched them suffer in the past?
Yeah. So Well, the first article I wrote on this was just kind of a more generic of how as Christians we handle suffering, but we took a quick look at Job. I mean, he's probably
Mhm.
the iconic figure when it comes to suffering. Just
Right.
for, I mean, no one quite like Job. But then, look at David. David suffered a lot, whether it's from Saul attacking him and different enemies, to
Mhm.
even suffering from his own sin and the
So you
the
call him
consequences of his own sin.
yeah, so you call
The
him the
suffering
suffering
king.
king. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Okay.
the most recent that I've done is, like I mentioned before, is my paper on Paul and his theology of suffering.
Yeah. Mhm.
That's another figure, one of the bigger figures we have of who has gone through so much suffering, who went through so
Yeah.
much suffering. It's it's amazing. I mean, it's amazing. One of the books for the classes that I had that spoke on Paul. I mean, it was the guy had pages of a list of all the suffering that Paul went through. It's kind of crazy. Uh,
Oh,
but
I'd like to
then
see that. Yeah.
but then the final article that'll come out after I finish the Paul series will be on Christ and how Christ
Mhm.
dealt with suffering.
Yeah. The suffering God.
Yeah.
No, I mean, just talking about Paul and the list that he provides of his sufferings. Um, he's also the same guy, 2 Corinthians 4:17, that says these light momentary afflictions.
Yeah.
And he's being, considering his list of sufferings, we see he's being sarcastic when he calls them
Yeah.
light. But he says these light momentary afflictions prepare us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. So he's saying that the reason why we go through all of this, it is for a reason. It prepares us for eternity. It prepares us to be citizens of heaven. I've talked
Mhm.
about that a lot. I'm not going to get into it here, but people can find it on our website or here on this YouTube channel, and also in my published writings. But yeah, I mean, you talk about the suffering God, the suffering King, the suffering Apostle. And basically, ultimately, you're going to get to what does this mean for us when we suffer?
Yeah.
Um, and how does it, what's the practical benefits of watching and learning from the sufferings of others? How would you answer that? What are the practical benefits for us to study how others have suffered?
Well, I mean, the thing about suffering, obviously suffering it's awful. It's terrible to go through.
Yeah, I try to
But
avoid it.
again, yeah.
Besides
But
when I
like,
did MMA, I used to do
yeah.
MMA. People would be like, "Tim, do you just love suffering?" But other than that, I try to avoid it.
Yeah. um, but the big thing is that it makes us more like Christ. I
Mm,
mean, we get an image from Christ. There is his life, his death, and his resurrection. And right before his death is the suffering.
yeah.
And Paul even talks about how our own lives kind of follow that path of how we go through suffering. When we suffer, we are imitating Christ. Because
Mm,
if we die to sin when we accept Christ, we're imitating him in his death. And if we rise again in that new life that he gives us, we're imitating him in his resurrection. But we
mm,
also imitate him when we are suffering. So just suffering in of itself, you are being like Christ to an extent. And then to endure through the suffering, that's something even greater. I mean, that's something
mhm.
that's Paul's biggest message is like, you don't need to love suffering. That's not what he's trying to say. The point is that we need to endure through it
Yeah.
because Christ endured,
Mhm.
and it makes us more
Yeah.
like Christ.
Yeah, we will definitely we won't enjoy the suffering, but we can and we will enjoy the benefits of our suffering.
Yeah.
No pain, no gain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's basically what Paul was saying in 2 Corinthians 4:17. He's
Yeah.
like the first one to ever say no pain, no gain. Um, but yeah,
Well,
and he
and I
says it he says it, and I think in Romans, and we see that referred to again in James. Uh,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's definitely a Christian idea, especially a New Testament idea. So what were you going to
Yeah.
add?
Well, and I was just gonna say, I think, like you said, it prepares us for heaven.
Hmm.
I don't know if we can have a proper appreciation of God's goodness and God's glory without at least, even if you don't. experience some of this awful suffering yourself, but when you see what Paul went through
Yeah.
and what Christ went through, and what David went through, and then to see their reward at the end of it. Well,
Hmm.
for Paul's reward for remaining faithful and all the suffering he went through, to then be able to be in the future have his future resurrected body and to be with Christ all the time. How
Yeah.
much greater would that be when you know what it's like to not have been around Christ?
Hmm. Oh, yeah. Well, that gets me into why God allows it as
Mhm.
well, as because God has the end game in mind, and He knows that those who endure through the suffering will become prepared to live in the kingdom of heaven, to live within those walls of the kingdom of God. Unlike, Satan,
Mhm.
he didn't have these afflictions and these sufferings. He was created in a perfect state of affairs,
Mhm.
uh, and the with the most blessing possible, except for one thing: he did not have the ability to learn from suffering the
Mhm.
way we do. So Satan and the angels and even Adam and Eve, they were created in a suffering-free state of affairs in the presence of God, and they took it for granted and wrecked it.
Mhm.
Everybody else is created separated from God, and in the midst of suffering, with the ability to choose to leave it, to be in a suffering-free state of affairs in the presence of God and everybody who loves Him, as we were created to be in the first place. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I it is so important to both study why God allows suffering. It's helped me so much as I've gone through suffering over the years,
Mhm.
over the past several years, as I've studied this, and I've seen why God allows it, but then to learn from the sufferings of others. Um, Sometimes when we can learn from others, we don't have to go through it ourselves. Now, we're
Yeah.
all going to go through suffering, right?
Mhm.
But we're not. I'm not. I mean, I hope I can go through, um, or that I don't have to go through, say, a crucifixion, right?
Yeah.
But I can learn from Jesus for how He handled that. I
Mhm.
can learn from the different sufferings that Paul went through, and I can watch how he handled that. And so we learn from the sufferings that we experience directly. We also learn from the sufferings of others. And we ought to do what you're doing now and highlighting how these different people suffered and what we can learn from them during those times, because we're all going to suffer on this side of death. But thank God, um, we have eternity to infinity and beyond. All right. For those who love Christ, we will live forever in a perfect state of affairs where there is no suffering, and we'll
Mhm.
never know of it again. But we'll always remember it. We'll always remember the few decades of life we had here on this planet. So we won't take
Mhm.
it for granted. We
Yeah.
won't be as stupid as Satan was, because we will always remember we will remember how stupid it is to
Yeah.
not follow the law of Christ and to not walk according to His commands. We will remember that doing such things leads to pain,
Mhm.
and so we won't take it for granted. Anyway, Thomas, I love the work you're doing. Um, I know you have so many ideas and plans. We even talked this morning about the possibility of, after you get done with your PhD in
Yeah.
theology, maybe going back into astrophysics and finish up that degree too.
Yeah.
Because Josh said this, that you went through suffering at the last ETS when I kept introducing you as the astrophysicist. And I did. I introduced you to Dr. Craig, to William Lane Craig. I'm like, hey, here's an astrophysics student. He was a major in astrophysics, now in theology. You guys need to talk, and you guys just hit it off. And I think what did you tell him, that you're reading his academic material to
Yeah,
push to sleep at night?
yeah, he had a paper on special relativity. That was my nighttime reading
Yeah,
for a
there you
little
go.
bit.
That's right. Oh man, that's awesome. Well, it's just been so much fun to get to know you over the last couple of years. You've already sharpened me so much. Hope I've returned the favor just a little bit, but I'm just having a blast working together, working with you, and cheering you on when you're doing. What's Josh saying now? He keep went to a session at the conference where the presenter said he would not have the ability to sit heaven.
We would not have the ability to sin in heaven.
Oh, I guess I need my glasses. Well, see, we're gonna have to. We have to bring some nuance to this. I argue, you tell this presenter that we could, but we never would because we're too smart for that because of these light momentary afflictions that have prepared us to be citizens of heaven. As opposed to tulip, I give Trump, Trump, not getting political. Just playing the Trump card. And we got total depravity, resistible, amazing grace, unlimited atonement, middle knowledge of the elect, and perseverance of free saints. I put the free saints in there because you could. There's nothing deterministically preventing you from doing the same thing that Satan did. Mm-hmm. But now we're too smart from that because we've learned from these light momentary afflictions that prepare us for eternity, as Paul taught. That's what I would argue. And Josh says he would not agree, but he's a Calvinist. So, well, there you go. If you're a Calvinist, you have to say, well, you can't because everything's determined. And so anyway, we'll get into that when Josh gets back. We'll get a report. He'll bring the notes. But yeah, Josh, you have fun there in Chicago and make some waves for God's glory and for Molinism. Slight Calvinism, but for intellectuals. Thank you to the Church Split for sending me this hoodie. Very grateful. All right. Well, man, Thomas, I've had a blast here today with you. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before we log off here?
I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity you give me and kind of taking me under your wing for the past couple of years. It's just it's been a pleasure, and it's been a lot of fun getting to know you, and you've definitely helped sharpen me. So I'm just glad to be a part of the ministry and work for God's glory.
Well, amen to that. I'm thrilled that we get to do that together. And let's keep sharpening each other like iron and encouraging one another. You're great at that. And I know Josh feels the same way. We've also got a couple others coming onto the team who aren't coming on as paid staff, at least right now, but are going to be regular contributors. We've got Dr. Peter Razor, who's a philosopher, and then Phil Kahlberg, who's a philosopher as well. And we've had Dr. Razor on the show before. He's going to be on more often, and we'll have Phil on the show some more soon. He's been on it, I guess, in the past as well. But man, we've got a good team. We've also got some great guys that used to be on the team that are now doing other things, and we wouldn't be here without them. In the past, they were they helped build this thing. Think of guys like Timothy Fox and Adam Coleman. Really thankful for you guys and how God is using you guys right now and in different ways. But man, we've got a really cool team. We've got an awesome board members from around the country now, and I'm looking forward to getting these different board members here on the Free Thinking Ministries channel as well. Yeah, I'm not going to list their names yet, but you'll get to meet them sooner or later. So anyway, Thomas, do you know how we sign off our shows here? How Josh and I do it?
I think so. Stay reasonable.
Okay. So we got it. So we'll try to do this. So, well, everybody that's watching, thanks for being here today. I know you missed Josh. He'll be back next week, and we'll cause some more trouble. But in the meantime, as we like to say, stay reasonable. Oh, that was bad. But we'll work on it. Okay. See you guys later. Thanks for being here. God bless. I'm trying to stop this thing.